So to give people, we just went live, and so we want to give some people some time to hit the refresh button and log on to the right video. So I'm going to give some introductions a bit, and if everyone's got a good story, we can waste about 30 seconds here, make sure everyone's getting on. But I know today we got Joe Ruddy with us. She's Joe, how long have you been in the profession of helping people with their mind?
Helping people with their mind, about 30 years now. I hate to say that. That's a little scary, but yeah.
30 years personal life coach, and she has literally everything that you ever would need to know about psychology and your mind and how to move to the next step, and all the experience. And how many clients you think you've had? You keep track of that? How many?
Over the course of my career, you mean?
Yeah.
Probably several. I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 probably. I can't imagine.
1,000 clients. So you could be a total dork and still pick up on patterns on what everyone deals with fear. You don't have to.
Yes, it becomes just as, like night and day. Our brains are amazing, and they give us away. And yep, I can be a total dork, because I am.
Right. I know you. I know that's true. No, it's good. You're a very smart dork. And now we also have, I call him the warrior, because Kyle Granger's he serves in our military. He's gone through where you wouldn't stack the odds in his favor when he first joins the business. Walking in the door, how do you know how to do this? Never done anything before, and just doesn't even care what the odds might be. Just crushes them, and has a lot of good personal stories and experience on being the underdog, even in his own mind, even what someone else would expect him to do, and to just go build this thing anyway. And what's your $8,000 to $10,000 average per month in 9 or 10 months? Was that your average? Am I right?
Yeah, that's about the average for the year, and it's only going up.
Yeah. So Kyle's going to be after her, and then we have Charles Schlissel, who is having microphone issues. And that is not another person in his room. I've been to his house. That's a Spider-Man, and it scares you every time you walk into that room. And it's pretty bad to the bone, but it freaks you out every time. So if you could keep that off of there, I've had nightmares about that thing, because that's where I sleep. So if you get your microphone figured out, Charles, then cool, you're on. Just speak up and just interrupt and say, hey, I'm on, and don't be shy. If not, you can text me, and I'll ask the question for you if you have something. And Charles is this last year conquered in his personal life a lot of fear things, and he's smiling a lot more and loving it and more confident, but he's just on the next road. He's got one gigantic leg built with thousands of dollars in volume, and so he just got to build that other one, and he'll be promoting like crazy. So he's a perfect candidate for this call on crushing the next level of fear. So, got my notebook ready. Everyone get your notebook ready. Memorize everything in your book. And first up is Joe Ruddy.
Wow. Well, I love the subject of fear, because it's it's a natural emotion, and it's something that we all have. And within fear, there are many other emotions all wrapped up in it. There's anxiety. Sometimes there's depression. Sometimes there's panic. Sometimes there's even grief, shame, all kinds of emotions. So it's kind of a fun emotion to work with. When we think about fear, fear is actually, it's a gift. Fear is something that's born within us. It's not something we want to take away or wipe, out, for sure. If we think about how fear is helpful, it's a protectant for us. So we all have that little hairs on the back of our neck that pop up when we get fearful. And of course, very seldom is our gut wrong. So in that way, fear is a blessing. The fear we're talking about, I think, though, when we talk about having difficulty or challenges talking to people, we're talking about that sense of self, that we are afraid that we're either going to look stupid, sound stupid, we're going to lose the words, we're not enough. Maybe even in some of our minds there's that little question, do I deserve the prosperity that I'm creating? So it takes a real look at one's own self. And so that all of that kind of leads us to the part of my practice that I deal in, and that's the unconscious mind. Pardon me. There are two parts of our mind: our conscious mind, and that's the logic part of us. Our logics, we know things, we have things figured out, we see other people talking to people and making money and signing people. So logically, we know that we can do it too. We know that if Dave can do it, or Kyle can do it, or Charles can do it, I can do it. But what comes up in the unconscious mind is that part of us that really drives us. And the unconscious is that part of us that holds all of our memories. It holds all of our feelings. And those memories and feelings are kind of interesting because every memory that we've ever had, every experience we've ever gone through, everything we've ever read, smelled, tasted, watched on TV, that's all still lodged in our unconscious mind. And we think we forget things, but it's still there. So within that unconscious mind, there is a feeling, believe it or not, attached to every memory that we've ever had. So if you think about that, it's kind of mind-blowing. And whenever we get in the similar or same circumstance that we were once in when we were a younger person and had some sort of trauma around that, then the unconscious job is just to bring that same feeling right back up in the present moment that we had back when we were a child. So for example, if we had trouble talking and yeah.
I was going to go ahead and give you your example because I had a question about that.
Okay. Maybe we were a kid. Maybe we were a kid and we had trouble standing up in front of the class and it was traumatic. So the unconscious holds on to that fear whenever we get into that same situation now, which we might be in our business. The unconscious then produces that same fear.
So it would, and even having trouble standing up from the class, you're saying might have come from an association from something else even before that.
Exactly.
So is that fear ever like rational? Is it, because sometimes people are just like, get over it. But some people say, I can't. I don't know why, but I can't. How do you understand what that is?
Well, therein lies the issue. It's the unconscious is this vast storehouse of memory and feeling. So it's constantly, that part of our brain is constantly trying to match us so that we know what to do and how to act in certain situations. So it becomes an automatic response. It's something that in that moment, once you go down the path of fear, you're stuck in there because you're acting out just as you did that first time. And we're looking at a time between birth and age 8 usually. So interestingly enough, that's exactly what's happening. There was some point in your history where there was trauma around being able to speak out, or feelings that you were not, you would, whatever your fear is, that you would look stupid, you would sound stupid, whatever. So there, as a kid, there's usually some taunting that goes on, whether in school or even at home with families. Sometimes kids play when we were young, but of course the unconscious, the other part of that is the unconscious does not understand the difference between fantasy and reality. So I know we've all had dreams and we wake up from the dream and we don't know where we are for a minute. That's because that conscious logical part of us has to kick in and tell us, hey, you're home, you're in your own bed. Whereas the unconscious, we were just in the dream. So we don't know we're dreaming until we wake up, right?
Right. So some people will say, I had, like myself, I had a really good life. When you say trauma, I want to be clear, that doesn't necessarily mean like someone hit you in the face with a baseball bat in front of the classroom. That can be something, I had a really good life and didn't have any level of abuse, and I was really fortunate. It was a gift that I didn't deserve to have such a good life, but I still created fears along the way. I've heard we're born to be awesome, or we're born to be brave, and we're programmed to fear. So even, it doesn't have to be like this abusive thing. Trauma can just be like what things could we look out for to know what our own fear comes from?
Well, it's a situation where it can be something as simple as a baby falls out of a high chair and they have a fear of heights from then on, because when you're a baby, that 2 foot down or 3 foot down is a long drop. So it can be something very simple as that. It can be along the way, it can be a lot of us have traumas from school. So when I say trauma, again, I mean a trauma to a kid is not the same as a trauma to an adult. So tauntings, maybe a sports activity that didn't go the way we thought it should, perhaps I know in my own case, there was a lot of taunting about my religion as a child. So therefore, everything you do, how do you fight right? So I had to overcome a lot of those fears, about talking in public and about, being different than other children. So does that make sense?
It does, and it reminds me of, I've talked to you before about this. about my personal experience. I'll give my personal experience as a testament or whatever. But remember, I worked with you before on I was 18, but my whole thing I was a wrestling in high school, and I worked really hard for 4 years and was in the gym 12 months out of the year and all this stuff preparing for the big championship. And that day lost by 2 points to the future champ, and I was supposed to go to the next round and didn't. And in my mind, for 10 years later, today I still fight this, that no matter how hard you try, you can pour your guts out, put your heart onto it, you still end up kind of just being disappointed in the end anyway. So the harder you try, the more it hurts when you don't make it. It was crushing. So why would I go all out, really, on anything? Why go all out in your relationships? Why go out in being a daddy or your business, on anything? Why go all out when you're just going to be disappointed anyway? That was a belief that I had created, and who knows, I probably had that seed of a fear in the first place, and that just reinforced it. So not only do we have these things from childhood, but along our whole life, even as adults, it's being reinforced, it's being reinforced, it's being reinforced. And I totally interrupted you, and I'm sorry. So I want to give my personal examples that's true, and that I can testify that I'm still fighting that sometimes, like, I don't want to go drive 3 hours for a meeting, and I'll hear Will Watkins say, no, that's why he got to where he does that. That's why he gets there. And I'm saying, why? I'm going to spend all that gas, all that money, all that time, all that energy. It's going to be a big disappointment anyway. That's stupid thinking, but I still fight it.
Right. It's our own thought process around the time when whatever we did ended in rejection. Maybe that's the way to put it. Rejection or some kind of disappointment. So we're the example I use with people when I do a session is, for example, and this is a true life example, if there was once a 3-year-old child, and this 3-year-old draws a picture for their mother, and they take it to the mother, look, Mommy, what I made for you. The child is in joy, they're in giving, and the mother says, I don't have time for that now, I got to go make dinner for Dad. Okay, something fairly innocent. God knows we probably all as parents done stuff like that. But that kid is going to leave that situation in a feeling of rejection, and she's going to make an immediate conclusion about herself when she walks away. Mommy doesn't have time for me. No one loves me. And she's going to leave in isolation, go to her room. That pattern is going to be repeated then every time she gets in from child to an adult. Whenever she gets in that situation where she has to present something or give something, there will be that same emotion come up, and there will be a withdrawal and a move away from that. And that's just the way our brains work. That's the crazy part. So that's kind of why I use the acronym, fear is false evidence appearing real. In other words, it feels real because we once went through that. But it's not necessarily real now. It has no bearing on the now.
Gotcha. And then one of our mutual favorite psychologists often says that when you buy a story or you become your identity, you already believe that long before you even have a chance to reinforce something different. So if you believe that you're not worth someone's time, or you're not good at speaking because everyone laughed at you in class, and that gets reinforced and you believe that, it actually becomes part of your identity. And then we hear excuses like, I'm just not the personality to talk in front of people and all these things. Well, everybody can talk in front of somebody, but if you're afraid, it's a lot easier to say, it's not my fault. I'm not that type of person. My identity is I'm stupid in front of people. And so you're going to give us an exercise later to help break through all of that. And if you have anything else, a couple last words you can before we go to Kyle, and then you'll have more time later too. But do you have anything else?
I think just basically, just to reinforce what you said, and that is we all talk to people every day, and so that's the reality. And we have to separate real fear from false fear. We talk to people in the grocery store. We talk to our neighbor. We were all strangers at one time, and I know when we meet at the conventions, we don't act like strangers. We're friends, and that's so the reality is very different from that false story that we've told ourselves, and then relied on the unconscious just to make that true.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. God, that's good stuff. I'm over here talking. I have no notes. I have to go back and take notes. Thank you. That there is going to free some people if they apply and understand that and do some investigation on yourself and what Joe just taught us. Then that could free you. Okay, Warrior Granger, what's up, man?
How you doing, bud?
Real life Zeal fear crushing experience from you, because you're a warrior crushing experience, man.
Well, number one, I can sit here and listen to Joe all day. I love listening about stuff like this because it's one subject I have no clue about. So hearing somebody that actually knows their stuff about this, it's really impressive. I'll tell you, everyone, as you know, is going to have fear in any kind of business venture in their life. I don't really stick just to business, but that's pretty much what we're here for. I mean, we're talking about Zeal, we're talking about Zervita, we're talking about changing our lives and what fear is associated with that. When me and Heather first started, when we stepped out into this adventure we call multi-level marketing, Zervita, there was a lot of fear associated with that. There was fear of change. Joe was talking about you have all these fears that you've kind of subconsciously built up from your childhood. Well, one fear you're never going to be able to really get over, I think, is just fear of change. I mean, a lot of people deal with that on a constant basis. That it's a very hard thing to get over. Is everyone likes their same old, same old. They're very comfortable. If they stay in this little spot in life and continue to do the same old, there's no way that they're going to get hurt. Just like you were talking about, Dave. If I just stick on the sidelines and don't get in the game, there's no way I'm going to get hurt. So, in anybody's life, the first choice they have to make is, I want to change. I want something different. And that's their first success over fear, I believe. And so, one of the things that we had to deal with was everyone else's fear. If you'll believe that, when I talk about that, I mean, you'll be amazed at when you make a life-changing decision, how many of your friends and family are afraid that you are going to leave them behind. And you'll never see that again until you make that step to change, and then you see how much opposition you have. These people that you think are going to support you the whole way, whether they get involved with the business or not, actually lash out at you like nobody's business. I mean, we're talking about, me and Heather literally sat on the floor in our living room and looked at each other 4 times, specifically our first month, and we said, is this worth it? Do we really want to keep doing this? Because this is the hardest thing we've ever done. And you just never realized how hard it was but what happened was we looked at each other and we said, listen, are we doing this for them, or are we doing this for us? And that's the thing. That's what Joe was talking about, that fear of failure. But what I feel like is when you have that fear, it's because you're putting people before yourself, right? I mean, if you're fearing of failing in front of people, that means that you put their opinions and what they think over what you think. So what we had to do is we had to decide, listen, we're worth it. Number one, we're worth going for it. We deserve to have a better life than what we're living. And we are going to put ourselves over everyone else, because this is our life. They're not going to be paying our bills. They're not going to be, talking with us every single day, every second of every day. So, I mean, that's just that was a huge thing in our business.
I have a question, because that is so inspirational for so many people. Will in fact, Kyle, I'll just be honest. I've heard this about you and my own team, and I had to stop it, because they'll say, "Well, if I was Kyle Granger, I'd have Will Watkins as a sponsor." First, I'm like, "Hey, forget you, I'm your sponsor. Okay, so shut up. You're fine." But if I was Kyle, then, well, it was easy for him because he found, or it was easy for them because his wife's at home and they did it together. There's always something. And no one really knows the times when you and Heather almost quit and wanted to. So there are real time, and it's not that you're trying to hide it. This is just, no one knows. This is private stuff. And you don't go in front of a room and say, "Man, I'm scared. Aren't you guys?" Your idea is to lead. So, Joe, if you could tell us what Kyle just told us, what they did, in his words, what him and Heather did. There is a pathway that was triggering fear from how long in their life, and then they broke the pattern and ignited some new synapses and told them a different story. Can you tell us, like, psychologically what happened to them on those living room floors when they were, like, he just told us what they did. Tell us why it worked and what happened scientifically.
Well, the unconscious, obviously, we want to be liked. We want our friends to like us. Nobody wants to be, pointed out as being different. So unconsciously, when the fear came in, when you thought about quitting, that's all kinds of hormones and chemicals being released from your brain that trigger, almost a panic type situation within us. That original fear. It mimics that original fear that was created, that you learned somewhere, you and Heather learned along the way. Probably it started between age 0, birth, and age 8, and then got reinforced, as Dave said, throughout your life. So what happened is, when you decided to tell a new story, when you decided that you meant more than what other people said, that's you beginning to actually change the way your own brain process the information. So you're literally changing the neural pathways in your brain. So I like to think of our brain almost like a pinball machine. You know those old pinball machines we used to play, where you pull the trigger, the ball, and the ball goes up and hits something and has the ding, right? And when you hit the ding, you know you're going to get it right back down in the hole. Well, that's what happens. The unconscious, we get in a situation, and unconsciously it triggers that old pattern. Okay, so the pattern of, I don't like this, I'm fearful, I'm going to quit, I'm moving out, and it's just bing, bing, bing. So when you made a different decision, and then you begin to act in that decision, you literally changed it. It desensitized that old feeling, and you found that there was success in doing it the new way. So you change when and how those hormones are released from your own brain by changing your own story, and it's really that simple.
Hey,
so then,
I was just wanting to say one thing. One of the big things, and just for everyone that's listening out there, one of the big things that changed me and Heather's mindsets, just like Joe's talking about, we can all think a different way. We can all try to do it, in our minds. But one of the biggest things that we ever did was we spoke it. We spoke it out of our mouths, even when our minds didn't believe it. So when me and Heather were in our place of defeat and we were thinking everything was going to fail, we would make each other say, we're going to do it, we're going to succeed, and we spoke it, Joe and Dave, we spoke it until our minds caught up. And that's a big thing that we did. So
I have a question. When you're in that situation, if you could relive it for a second, and you and Heather on the living room floor, probably, I'm guessing, somebody had to come first and say, you know what? Damn it, we're going to do it anyway, right? I mean, did somebody start that conversation and then the other person said, yeah, you're right? Or was it always, somebody, and Joe in a second after he gives an answer, talk to us about a break state, because those patterns started and someone had to break the state to a new pattern. So how would that look like, Kyle? Did somebody always start it and then you guys piggyback because you're partners? What was that like?
Well, like I said, it was 4 times, and I remember them specifically. And each time, believe it or not, it was me or her. Both, we kind of, when I was down, she would pump me up, and when she was down, I would pump her up. And it was the fact that we made a pact together to change our lives, and we kept each other accountable, and it was awesome.
So, Joe, how important is accountability partners and communication? And then tell us what a break state is and why that's important.
A break state, that is the exact term for when that neural pathway is changed from when you're going down a path and you make a left-hand turn or right-hand turn from the way you've always gone. So how that happens is the break state. When we're in that thing with our brain and we're like, oh, this isn't going anywhere, and we start going down that negative path, the path that we've been on before, that we've talked ourselves into, our old story. If you can stop that path at any point, and we can do it in a lot of different ways. It can do it by somebody else saying something that's a bit startling, or a commitment that was made that is more that brings us right back to. It's basically a shock to the system. So you can also do that by when you're with yourself. By if you're in that negative pattern and you're aware of those thoughts, you can just stop for a minute, be aware of your surroundings, what's in the room, the smell of the room, your behind on the seat you're sitting on. It gets that unconscious off that path, and that's really what we want. So then the new story is put in there in that moment, and you begin to make a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn. instead of going straight down the road to hell, which is where we've all been.
And I know, Kyle, you use a dream board. Another good break state tool is that focus board or the dream board, where you've reminded yourself, why am I doing this? This sucks. This isn't working. You look at it, you go, oh yeah, that's exactly why. I'm going to keep going. Is that a break state too, Joe, or is that something that is that another wrench I threw in the pile?
No, that's a break state. Anything you can do to begin getting your mind to live. Now remember, the unconscious doesn't know. That unconscious is that part of us that holds the feelings or the fear. So if it doesn't know that difference between what's real and what's fake, which we know it doesn't, then you go stand in front of your dream board, you look at that house in Tahiti that you want, or that dream vacation, and you imagine your feet in the sand, and you know that sun coming down, and you know that wallet full of money. The unconscious begins, oh, okay, so that's what we're doing now. And then it leads you down that path.
You're saying that unconscious doesn't know that that's a fantasy necessarily. It just knows that's what I want. And then it'll give the right chemical shifts to make that move toward that direction. Okay, cool. So Kyle, I'm gonna, because we're buddies, so I can say whatever I want. You have to love me anyway. So you know what I come from my heart when I say Kyle is, and Joe, tell me if I'm right or not, because I just make things up and sometimes I miss. He's a master at his emotions. He's probably not the biggest master at handing out samples or closing a meeting, or I mean, he's good at all this stuff. He's got the skills. But what's making him the money and the success and even feeling good about it, because we know people who are millionaires who still are miserable. You know, making $10,000 a month is chump change to like somebody else who's super rich. But Kyle's the richest man of all, just with his happiness. He's a master of his emotions. So he doesn't even care anymore if he messes up giving a sample, because he just has got a bigger picture. He masters his states. And so that fear is just a state. Happiness is just a state. None of it's like real or not real. They're just states of temporary emotion. And so what Kyle and Heather did together was become like, they mastered what they were thinking and why they were thinking it, and they got good at just changing it when it needed to be changed. So they drove the right action. And it turns out you don't have to be anything special to do what Kyle did. You just have to have that special that awareness, like you said. You have to be very specially attuned to what you want and why you want it. And he could be the worst